And he went on to mention some of those values, which he said were anti-fascism. I mean, that's the first thing, but also Russophobia and anti-Semitism. Those are two things I think you don't often hear from a Russian leader.
Russia is celebrating Victory Day today, a day after VE Day, marking the 80th anniversary of victory over Nazi Germany. Traditionally, the day's been marked by a huge military parade through Moscow, but since the invasion of Ukraine, the country seems to struggle to pull one of those together. Last year, just one tank rolled through Moscow's Red Square, compared to as many as 131 before the war. Let's speak now to Mary Dejevsky, former Moscow correspondent for The Times. Mary, good morning.
Good morning.
So what is happening at today's parade? What goes on?
Well, I've been watching the Russian coverage so far. It began at 8 o'clock our time, 10 o'clock Moscow time, and it was entirely military without the hardware. I think the hardware comes towards the end of the parade and we're not there yet. So the sort of tank spotting, counting, technology, registering that we always did during the Soviet times and which is now back again with a vengeance. It's just a bit early to see that. But there was some very interesting impressions of what came of how the first sort of half hour of the procession proceeded.
And crucially, as part of that, there was a kind of welcome for some world leaders, perhaps most notably President Xi of China.
Yes, and people were watching to see where Xi Jinping might be seated, whether he would be seated next door to Putin on the reviewing stand, and the answer was yes, he was. He was very much in the position of honour. Russia says that there are, I think, 27 foreign leaders taking part. And they were all ranged on the stand sort of around Putin. And an interesting little sort of sideline was that there were contingents from many of the countries represented by their leaders marching in the parade on Red Square. And as each of them went by, the respective leader stood up, as it were, to claim their representation. They didn't actually take a salute, but they stood up in recognition of their contingent.
Putin has also been speaking, lying, spreading propaganda, as he is prone to doing. He said Russian society is supporting the participants of the special military operation in Ukraine. He said truth and justice are on our side. Who is this day for? I suppose is my question, because we pay attention to it around the world, Mary. Is it for Russian citizens as well? Do they get anything from this?
No, I think it's certainly for Russian citizens because it's a demonstration of national identity, national unity, national strength. I think it sends all sorts of messages to Russians. And certainly, when I was watching the the Russian coverage of that, that the message was very clear that this, we are a strong nation, we're going to fight till victory. That was one of the messages from Putin. In what was, I thought it was actually an unusually short speech for this sort of occasion in Russia. I think it was just short of 10 minutes. And he, as you said, he referred to the special operation, which is how the official term that they use for the invasion of Ukraine. But he also talked about, we're defending our national interests. We will defend our national interests and our values. And he went on to mention some of those values, which he said were anti-fascism. That's the first thing, but also Russophobia and anti-Semitism. Those are two things I think you don't often hear from a Russian leader.
Yeah. The Ukrainian response to all of this, we should pay attention to as well. One of the elements of this, of course, in the build-up to it was that President Putin of Russia suggested this would be a period of ceasefire in the conflict in Ukraine. Ukraine said no, 30 days or nothing. How will Ukraine view today? What have we heard from Zelensky already?
Well, I think that the Ukraine obviously sees it as it were, a gratuitous show of force and show of strength, and they've also described the occasion as a farce, and the same applied to the ceasefire. Having said that, I think that I've heard reports from Ukraine this morning that say that actually over most of Ukraine there was something like a ceasefire that has been observed overnight. And while you may say, well, that's not very much, and yes, there was still firing on the eastern front line, nonetheless, I think there was a difference between yesterday and today, or at least before Russia declared a 3-day ceasefire. So it's not nothing, it's not a complete ceasefire, but it's not nothing.
Yeah, that in itself could be notable as well. President Trump has slightly changed his tone on Putin's approach as well, and is sort of nudging towards the 30-day ceasefire, which is what Ukraine has been requesting. Just as a final note then, Mary, how long does this parade go on for? You were saying some of the hardware is still to be demonstrated. There are reports that the drones, they might even display some drones that they've been using to attack Ukraine.
Yes, I mean, I think we're probably going to see the whole gamut of Russian technology paraded through Red Square. I think it's scheduled to go on for about 2 hours.
Right.
So it started 8 o'clock our time, should finish around about 10 o'clock. But then there'll be, the square will be sort of opened, and it'll be rather like the Mall when they open the Mall after a military parade, that all sorts of members of the general public come and have a sort of great free-for-all in Red Square.
Mary, really good to speak to you. Thank you for your updates and analysis as well. Really appreciate that. Mary Dejevsky, former Moscow correspondent there. It is, I mean, it's quite a spectacle, but it's very uncomfortable. And then you see Putin and President Xi of China kind of sat next to each other discussing the soldiers that are on parade in front of them. I think it's perhaps only uncomfortable because we know that Russian aggression has invaded a democratic country.
But it was really odd. I was looking at the live pictures earlier on, and Putin was standing there greeting world leaders, and he would stand there awkwardly. He was quite awkward standing there, and then like the Belarusian president would come in and they'd shake hands, and then he'd sort of be told off you go, and then he'd wait there again for another 10 or 15 seconds with the cameras on him, and Putin looked really, it was bizarre,
he's
just
nervous,
awkward,
isn't he, around other people, hence the long table, the famous long table,
and yet look at everything he does.
Totally.
It's very strange,
very disconcerting.